Are you in Chicagoland?
I'm not. I'm out in Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to work for a company in Chicago until like last November. But that's the closest I've been to Chicago.
The Chicago people may not like me saying this, but you're not missing anything. I mean, I know I'm here in Chicagoland, but I'm not from here.
Yeah.
I'm from Houston. Before I came here, I've had 15 years of living in New York City.
Oh.
So, came here, and it's not the same.
Yeah. I don't think I could do big cities. I'm in Eugene, Oregon. This is the biggest city I've ever lived in.
Wow.
It's I think 170 or 180,000.
It's still a nice city. It's a beautiful city. Beautiful place to be, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Abhishek, are you here in Chicagoland?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. I'm in Naperville. Yeah.
Oh, so am I.
Oh, nice.
You work downtown or?
No, I work remotely, so my office is like based in Louisville. Yeah, Kentucky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And yet you're here instead of, say, a low tax state like Kentucky.
Yeah, I kind of like it here.
I can understand that. I mean, Oregon's not known for low taxes either, so minus the no sales tax, which is nice.
That can be very nice. What's this? Need to change a setting here. What's this? Oops. Welcome, David.
Hello, everyone.
Trying to turn off the waiting room.
You're on there. It's my first exposure to Ring Central's video meetings.
Yeah, I've done this. I did this before. But apparently it's making me work for it today.
I feel like that's every day.
All right, where's my... And also, this is saying no upcoming meetings. What? You should know that I'm in a meeting. All right. Well, I feel like every week there's a slow roll up to getting us into number of people. But I think last couple of weeks, the last few all of the meetings have been about 10 people, give or take. So.
Okay, cool. Having just a few folks like this is great for the dialogue back and forth.
Oh yeah, I love having that ability to talk to people.
Yeah, and I do too, because I mean, without getting too far into the upcoming presentation, we're a startup, so all the feedback we can get is so valuable. Because it's all stuff that I wouldn't have thought of. Because I'm already working on the things that I've thought of.
All right, next time I'm not doing this like virtual meeting room. You know, you get Zoom bombed a couple of times. You don't do it. You start putting on security features, and then you get annoyed.
I've not been Zoom bombed yet, so I don't use the security features yet.
Anybody else?
I think my boss
So
might
you
be
just
joining as well.
okay. He wants to see what you're up to.
Yeah. Make sure I'm not lying about presenting to the cool PowerShell people.
I mean, we always have like 30, 40 people RSVP, and then maybe 10 actually show up. I know life of sysadmins, you get, sometimes you just have to work and respond to things.
Or sometimes you just gotta shut it all off and go outside.
Yeah, I was. It's a beautiful day. It's been a long, drawn out winter, and I'm thinking, yeah, after work I'll go for a bike ride, and then I go, oh wait, I've got this today, and I don't get the option. Well, my partner Antoine is not here right now, so I don't get the option of dropping off if Antoine's not here. So, um, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I enjoy this stuff. So
It's kind of like very windy outside, but the weather is good. Yeah.
yeah.
And very strange around here, but we got sleet this morning and snow yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah, this is not usual for Oregon. It's like it was just like a dusting of snow that was here for like 10 minutes and then gone.
I mean, do you get much snow in Eugene or none at all?
You know, usually it's not more than maybe once a year.
Hmm.
And even then it's like this year we got enough we were sledding down the neighbor's hill with the kids, but it's not usually even that much. So I think there's one time in the entirety of the 10 or so years that I lived here in Eugene that it dropped below like 10 degrees. Like a cold winter for us is in the 20s.
Oh, I'd love that as a winter. Oh, nice and balmy, warm. Be out in shorts. Yeah, I'd like that for winter.
Yeah, my dad grew up in Michigan, so he always makes fun of the winters out here. And so he literally had to walk to school in the snow. And here, when it snows, the whole city shut down because we don't have any snow plows. So
Yeah, we have. All right, we're at 8. 9. Okay, now we're getting people. I think because we're so close to 5. You know, now you get everybody starting to like. Now they've cut off.
yeah. Also, yeah, Bob is my boss, so he's here for all the salesy questions because I'm not a salesperson. So if there are any,
Hi, Bob.
Oh, Bob, can you hear us?
I know he unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything.
Send him a quick chat on Slack.
He's having technical difficulties. Okay, he says he can hear us.
Oh, there's chat here. Nice.
Mean. Oh, I heard something.
Okay, what about now?
Oh, there we
Yep.
go.
Hear
Hey,
you.
hallelujah. Okay, I just tried to turn my camera on too. Hey, this is Anthony's show. I'm just a listener. Yeah, the camera did not work.
Have you tried turning it off and turning it on again?
Yeah. You know, computers. That's okay. No worries. I'm not that important here.
Yeah, we'll let it be the Anthony show. All right.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Obviously, I hope there's no issue with this being recorded and then posted on the our YouTube channel.
Totally fine.
I know we get several more people who watch because they miss it for whatever reason, work emergencies. I know a lot of people who get back to me and go like, yeah, I had a work emergency, but I always hope they join. But Clem's a regular. Hi, Clem.
Hey guys.
But all right, so I think we've reached a point, and I'm keeping an eye for people who are coming in and get into our waiting room. But yeah, today we're going to have Anthony Howell speak. Remind me again the product and your company.
Runway. That's what it's called.
Okay.
And I'll get into the whole explanation in the talk. But
Okay.
we'll be looking at the PowerShell stuff with Runway, which is what I like.
Right.
So that's why I'm here.
I love it too. So I've never used your product. I love the PowerShell. When PowerShell's involved, I love it. So.
Yeah.
But all right, I'll let you have it.
Okay, cool. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay, there we go. Oh, whoops, I might have just shared the wrong screen. You guys see my calendar or my my GitHub screen?
I see your GitHub screen.
Okay, cool. All right, so I store all of my presentations just in my GitHub repository, the Powershell/sessions. And I can paste this in the chat. But if anyone's interested in like following up or any of the links that I have, they're all going to be in here. I just wanted to throw that out there before we jump into it. So yeah, first off, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak here. This is the second PowerShell user group that I've spoken at about Runway specifically. But I do want to start with saying that I'm not a salesperson. I have a PowerShell background. I've been doing it for a long time, and for me, Bob found me because he sent me a random email saying, "Hey, we have this cool product that does PowerShell stuff. You do PowerShell. You're interested in a demo." Saw a few demos and asked if they were hiring, and so here I am today. But essentially, so I'm a systems engineer. So I build out actions, and I'll get into what actions are in Runway. I do some product management informally, and if any PowerShell folks use Runway, I'll be working with them. I write all the docs, and the PowerShell SDK. We have fully featured PowerShell SDK. So because I'm working at Runway, we do a lot of PowerShell stuff. And then of course I also do demos, and so we'll be going through some of the demos here as well. And this is the only marketing stuff that we'll get into for this whole session, just to give you some background on Runway. So it's fairly new startup. Runway was founded about 2 years ago. So the two founders, one of them's Bob, who's on the call here, and then Greg. They've done other products or other software things in the past. So they know what they're doing, which was another really big incentive for me to join the team. And I have I've written here that we're in stealth mode, but we literally just turned on some big marketing yesterday. So after I wrote this, so I don't know if we technically are in stealth mode, but that just means that we're not doing any big time marketing, but there's no restrictions in talking about it. So like that, what you're saying, posting a YouTube channel, totally fine. And yeah, we don't currently have a lot of users since we're an early startup. So if you do have feedback, please let us know. Positive, negative feedback, anything. You know, we're trying to build a product that can be really useful. And one of the groups that we're targeting, because it's my background and the group that I identify with the most, is PowerShell folks. And we do have a free version. So everything that I'm going to show you today, you can do in our free community version. There is no feature limits. The only limit is the number of endpoints. So and I'll get into the full explanation, but Runway automates endpoints no matter what kind of endpoint that is. And so the free limit is just 100 of those, which is a pretty high limit, if you ask me. Anyway, so I mentioned links. I have all the links here at the top. So if you need to find our website, which is all the marketing stuff, so you probably won't need it. We have our documentation, which I've written. So if you see any issues, obviously let me know. The login portal to get into the product, and we'll get there in a sec, as well as our actions repository. And I'll get into what actions are, but we open source all of our actions. So we really feel like that's something that we can really work with a community on. And so that's why we've done that. And then the PowerShell SDK itself, I have the code in GitHub. And it's an auto-rest module. So if you guys are ever interested in talking about auto-rest stuff, definitely let me know, because it's something I build and manage. And then we got it published as well at the PowerShell Gallery. And before we dive into anything, if you guys have questions, just shout them out, throw it in the chat. I'll keep that up. This is pretty informal, and I love the questions. Happy to stop and answer them as we go. Okay, so what Runway is. So kind of mentioned it's an automation platform. And so at its core, it orchestrates, and I have here saying it orchestrates arbitrary code. And so tonight we're going to be talking PowerShell specific stuff, but Runway can run anything on an endpoint that will actually execute. So that could be on Windows, it can be PowerShell, it can be a batch script, it can be a VB script. You can send it an executable and run that executable. You can send it like a standalone py.exe and run a Python script. We're not PowerShell specific. We're not restricted in any way. And so it's one of the tools that as a PowerShell person, you can pick up, use it for PowerShell, and then another team member that knows Python can also pick it up and use it as well and get a lot of mileage out of it. And we have teams that are doing just exactly that. PowerShell people and Python people that are using it and both getting a lot of really liking it. And so the platform itself has a workflow engine that runs what we call jobs. So all the platforms have their own names for these things. So like I was talking with the guy earlier today, that's like, oh, it's just like an Ansible playbook. Yeah, it's same thing, but it's Runway specific. And we have some connectivity features, and I'll get into some of this further on, as well as, of course, we have the central management where you can log in and manage everything. It's pretty standard. But one of the things I love about Runway is that it is entirely API driven. So I have this very simple graphic here to demonstrate that. So we have Runway in the middle. Everything that you can use to manage Runway talks to the API. So if you log into the portal, which we'll do, that uses the API in the background. We have a Runway utility, which is just a little compiled executable. That also talks to the REST API. The PowerShell SDK also talks to the REST API. And the cool part about that is that anything you can do in the UI, you can do in PowerShell. So you could conceivably spend some time learning Runway and then never have to log into the UI again. And I've got some really cool examples that I want to show you guys that does that. And then also we have our runners here. So I've got a Linux, a Windows, and Docker. So it can run in a container. The agent itself is very light. I think it has about a 3 megabyte memory footprint and a 4 megabyte disk footprint. So it's It's incredibly small, and we achieve that with a really hardcore old school C++ developer. So we don't have like huge Go libraries or something, which is cool. And we do have macOS support on the roadmap. So if that's something you're interested in, and you're also interested in Runway, reach out, let me know. So we talked about actually most of these things already, because I got ahead of myself a little bit. So I mentioned connectivity. So we can actually move data between any two runners. So a runner is the endpoint that has the agent installed on it. So we are an agent-based system. I skipped that part. Sorry about that. And using Runway, you can move data between any two endpoints without any kind of network connectivity requirements. We'll get into some examples on that. And we do have some other, basic features as well, like being able to do asset discovery on networks. And we have, and this is something I've never seen in any other product. So if you have a runner installed on a Windows device, and that runner service is running with a privileged Active Directory account, you can actually have the runner self-deploy itself, so deploy additional runners in the same network, as long as they're all in the same Active Directory domain. So it almost is like feels like a virus worm, but it only does that when you want it to. And we have features built in to limit it in scope and IP ranges, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's a cool feature I like mentioning, because I've never seen anything else that does that. Any questions so far? Cool. So let's jump into the portal itself. So I'm at portal.runway.host. If any of y'all want to jump in and sign up for a free account, there's just this enroll as a new user. We really just need your email address and then set up a password and a name as well. If you want to give us other information, you can, but you don't have to. So let me just get logged in here. All right, so, and I have this zoomed in a little bit just for the presentation, or as I zoom it in. So it will look a little squished, but this is what it normally looks like. So so it might feel cramped, but it's only because of the I've zoomed in for the presentation. So the first screen you log in is this is where you have a list of devices. I got a pretty small lab environment set up here. I've got a domain controller and the web server and some other a CA server, and I got a server in Azure. But enrolling runners in Runway is pretty simple. So I mentioned we have that Runway utility. So it's just an executable you can run. It's got an install command to actually install. So I actually copy this down. And I already have the executable downloaded, but if you don't, there's this option to download it up here, as well as if you're on Linux, you can download the Linux executable as well. But with that command, it's literally just a matter of running the Runway this looks really weird with the whoops. Let me make this console a little wider. With the Runway install and then the token, and that token will associate it to your tenant. And we also have this flag for -s, which is the server. So our intention with Runway is, so right now it's a SaaS platform. So we host it in our Azure tenant. We plan on setting it up so that a customer could deploy it from the Azure, AWS, GCP marketplaces and host it themselves. And so we already have some features built in so that you can redirect, like the SDK, you can point it to a different host if you wanted to. But with that Runway install, it's going to run through it and install it. And it's going to fail here because I already have my laptop enrolled. And so you notice that I did this through the UI. So using the API, or sorry, the SDK, we can do, I'm also not logged in as administrator. So yeah, of course, this one. So using the API, the SDK, we can connect Runway using our email address. We'll give it our password. And we can so find that executable and download it. Here, I'm not gonna actually run through the. I'm not gonna download it because we don't need to do that. But we can find, just as an example, all of the available executable downloads. So we got the Linux, Windows 64, and then we can use the SDK to then download it and then get that token. And part of this here, we're looking at groups. Excuse me. So in Runway, we can sort items by, excuse me. We can tag items here to filter them, but we can also put them in groups. So, like for instance, if you have like a service provider environment and you need to sort them by customers, you can put them in different groups. And then clicking on this add endpoints with the context set to this group will then generate a token that is specific to this group. So if you're using the SDK to enroll it, you just have to make sure and make sure that you specify the group. And the UI does that implicitly based on what your context currently is. So then let me switch back and let's actually do something here. So to actually run a job, we can select a device out of here and just click on create job. This is going to take me to the job creation screen. And there's currently a bug in the UI that we were planning on deploying to production today to fix. So it doesn't load this bottom section. So if I just have to create an action, and then it does. So you can see down below, I've got the one runner that's assigned to this job, which is just my laptop. And then the center here is just where you add the actions. So a job is a collection of actions that's going to run on an assigned group of runners. So for instance, I have a job I wrote that just gets all the installed software on a device. Cool, very simple. So I can create job and it's going to run that. And you notice I've got a lot of jobs here and I forgot to grab the name of that job. Let me do a refresh. Okay, here we go. So it's already initiated on my laptop. So the back end of Runway it's built on Kubernetes. And so it maintains an active WebSocket to all the runners. And so it can actually initiate the job very quickly, which is cool. And it's probably even already done. There we go. And one of the future improvements that we're going to make is to this job screen. We had a customer today tell us about how Ansible was so much better at showing jobs in action. And that's absolutely true. And we know that. So, but if we select this job, we can now scroll down to our assigned runners, and we have these couple of buttons available to us. And if I click on this page button, this shows me the log from the action. And it didn't output anything, which is usually good. And jobs should be designed to output something. So shame on me for not writing anything to the console. But this job does define create results that shows all the installed software on a device. And I can access those results by clicking on this download button. And there's an automated way to do this. I just want to just show this in the UI first. And it downloads this zip file, which is the results of the action. And came up on the screen. And so we've got a CSV file that just has a list of all the software installed on my device. And so the way that Runway handles results is, yes, you can come in the UI and manually download the results, but the only time it's ever useful is when you're developing an action, at least what I've found. Like it doesn't serve any other purpose. But we have, let's see. All right, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Oh, let me back up for a second before we get talking into what connectors are. This is why I write things down so I don't get too far out of whack here. Oh, whoops. Sorry, I accidentally hit back on. I have a back button on my mouse. So results in Runway, and I've got this linked here to our actual docs page that talks about results are. But results in Runway are whatever the action wants them to be. So in this case, the script is, I can actually bring up the script here, because I know you guys like the PowerShell code. So it's going to endpoints, get installed software, and I'll get into what the structure is in a little bit. So this script that it runs, all it does is it looks at the registry. So that's what this line 11 is here. It reads the uninstall keys and then finds. I'm not going to explain everything here, but if you guys got questions about this, I'm happy to talk about it. And it does some filtering and sorting on that, and then it outputs it as a CSV file. And the results, remember I said they can be anything that the action wants it to be. The results are anything that are dumped into the results folder while the action is being executed. So in this case, the results are literally just a CSV file. These results could be, a JSON file. It could be a database dump. It could be a certificate. There's whatever you want it to be. And this is going to make sense here as soon as we talk about connectors. That being, or connectors being a way to actually do something with that data. And I have this little graphic here to remind me to say that whenever the job completes, it creates those results, and those are cached on the runner. They're not stored in Runway. So when you want to download them, so like I did in the UI when I went and clicked on this download button that didn't come back because it's just, there you go. What it does is it actually reaches out. So it's running. So the utility has a download command, which is essentially what we did. But it's reaching out to the runway and telling it that we need those results from that runner, and the runway is telling the runner to send me those results. So the runner finds those results and sends them up to the cloud, and then the cloud then proxies them down to wherever the results are being requested from. So that's how the results work in Runway when we do a manual download. And so connectors in Runway allow you to, let's say we assign this job to 100 runners or 1,000 or whatever the number is. And then we want to put those CSV files on the file share somewhere. So we can add put it in the wrong spot, sorry. We can add a download file action, which is a connector. And the difference between an action and a connector in Runway is that an action will run on all the assigned runners, and the connector will run on a runner specified when the job is created. So the actions run on everything. Connectors run on a single runner, and that runner can be one that's assigned or any other runner. And so I've defined this file server previously, and if we look at the connectors under configuration, this is where we can actually come in here and define it. So you can see file server here. It uses the download file action, and it's assigned to my laptop here. Just it's easier for me to demo these things if I can, if it's all on the same device. So let me bring up this job again. We're going to add the download file, assign it to my file server. And so what this will do is it will take that CSV file that was created in the first action and route it to my file server. And the cool part about Runway is that it doesn't matter where the two devices are, as long as they can talk to the Runway cloud. It will be able to move the results from one runner to the next. So these can be in completely different, locations, completely different clouds, no VPN required, and we can move that data. And so if I actually go ahead and save this and run it, it will. Oh, I might not initiate here. Let's give it a second. Sometimes when you manually initiate the job, it has some issues. Okay, there we go. Oh, it's already completed. Okay, cool. No, it's still in. So these bars that show up in the activity column here, this just show it will display at least one whenever any action completes. So if a job has multiple actions, you'll get multiple of those lines that show up. All right, cool. So it's downloading the results. But what's going to happen is on my device. Well, let me show you in the job itself. So it's telling you that it's going to put it in C Runway results on the file server. So on my device, we go to C Runway results. We should have. So I'm in Pacific time, so it is 3:35. Okay, cool. And if we open up the zip file, we can see that we've been able to move that CSV file. So let me get into some really cool examples of what how good connectors are. Where are we at here? Okay, so we have 3 different types of connectors, and I say that, and I really mean that they're general types of connectors. There's a lot of different ways to use them. So right here, this first one that I just demonstrated is what I call a reporting connector. So you get some kind of data in one or more actions. It doesn't have to just be one action, but in this case, it was one action. And it can be assigned to as many runners as you want. And then you send that data somewhere. So in what I just demonstrated here, we got the installed software in a CSV, moved it to a file server. However, you could, we had someone, we walked through a use case with a consultant where he wanted to, I can't remember what the frequency was, but like every 10 minutes or every hour, dump the DNS cache from all of his endpoints and then ship it to Elastic. And his problem was that the endpoints couldn't talk to his Elastic server. And so using Runway, as long as he's got a runner on those devices and then a runner that can talk to Elastic, we can move that data into Elastic without having any kind of networking requirements. And so that's what we call a reporting connector. So generally speaking, it just goes to the end of the job. And so we also have what I call a deploying connector. So in a situation where you have, let's say you have some sort of software that you've configured and it has a configuration file, and you want to use like I use the golden workstation idea where you have some line of business software where you have it configured and it's a really complicated XML file. And it's actually a real use case that I had when I worked at a bank. I don't know if any of you ever tried to, configure some of those old school financial applications. But we had a whole team that would maintain this file. And to get the data from there to all of the other workstations, we'd have to have an export it, and then we put it in SCCM and deploy it that way. And everyone knows that SCCM sucks. So with Runway, you can have a 2-step job. So I have this already set up here, golden config deploy, to where step 1 is a connector. So it runs on a specified endpoint, the golden workstation. You can see here, it grabs this config file, and in step 2, it deploys it. And this can be assigned to, hundreds, thousands of endpoints, and it'll move that file from the connector to all of the endpoints. And then the last connector is what I call a processing connector. So it takes data from runners, it does something with it, and then it sends it back. So the example I have here is, and these are all using PowerShell in the background. I know we haven't gotten really into any PowerShell stuff. It's coming. So in this case, we can assign this job to 100 web servers, and the web servers don't have to be able to talk to your certificate authority. You just have to have the Runway runner on the web servers and the certificate authority. And the step 1, it's going to create the CSR on the web server, and this is just an example. So in this case, it actually goes into IIS. It finds the website name, and it looks up the bindings and creates the subject based off those bindings. And then using Runway, it will send that CSR to your subordinate certificate authority, which is the center one here. And this is a connector. So we can see we've selected what runner it's going to run on. And that the CA will sign it. And then this step 3, which is an action, will actually take that same completed CSR back to the web server, and it will import it into its certificate store as a complete certificate. And so, and these are all PowerShell scripts in the background. If you want to see them, we've got them. I wasn't planning on talking about these ones specifically. I've got some other ones to show you. But that's how connectors work in Runway. And this is and I spent a little bit of time on this one, on the connector specifically, because it's one of the, in my estimation, one of the really cool features about Runway. Any questions on that before we actually dive into building PowerShell actions with Runway? I'm going to take this chance to also take a quick drink. Okay, so in Runway, the action itself is incredibly simple. This is also another thing I love about it. So the action will have this layout you can see here. So they all have to have a manifest.txt, which tells the runner what to execute. And then the rest of the other two files that I reference here, they're not required, but a repository.json file, this has a defined structure that defines metadata for the action. So some tags, what language it is, that sort of thing. So for instance, if we look here, we can see that this this action is a PowerShell action. That's because it has a repository.json file, which defines, which tells it what language it is. And then if you are running a PowerShell script, then you obviously need to include the PowerShell script as well. So that's what the script .ps1 is. So if we look at, so the actions repository, this is a public repository. You guys are welcome to take a look at. In here we have the. Oh, actually, I'm going to show you it in VS Code. This is a little easier for me. I'll even zoom this in a touch. So let's look at the. Oh, we'll look at get installed software. What we were just looking at. So here we have the manifest.txt, and this will always have at least 2 lines. Oh, Thad, I just saw your question. Do you also define environments? What do you mean by define environments?
I started to type, and then I figured it's easier to do this. So I know we can do more than just PowerShell, but with PowerShell, well, Python, I'm more thinking about, like, can you say in that? Can you say, like, set up this virtual environment, or pull in these requirements, or that's something we would have to define in whatever script is being run.
So at this point, we don't have specific features that will specifically address that, but yes, you could write that into the script.
Okay.
And so one of the things, one of the things that I've done is I've built some PowerShell specific actions. So like PowerShell, like in install module actions, the set execution policy action, just some very, what I originally called PowerShell meta actions. But yeah, for right now, you would have to write that into the script itself. And we do plan on having some more advanced features that are specific to PowerShell and Python, because I just had talked to someone earlier today about virtual environments in Python and Runway. So yeah. Okay, so get installed software. So we have the manifest file. So this first line, this just tells the runner what part of the action to extract. So the action is sent as a zip file and then extracted. At this point, I have yet to see a use case where you don't want exactly what is written here on line 1. But it's flexible enough that we support other use cases. I just haven't seen one. In line 3, run when will tell it what to run when the action is executed on a Windows system. And run lin with an L will tell it what to run when it's executed on a Linux system. So this action only supports Windows. We'll get into a Linux example as well. It's telling it to run PowerShell core, bypass the execution policy, and run this Windows/get installed software.ps1. So inside of the action, since they do support multiple operating systems, if you have a Windows folder inside of the zip file, only the Windows folder will be sent to everything in the root of the action and the Windows folder will be sent to a Windows host. Everything in the root of the action and the Linux folder will be sent to a Linux host. So we do have some pretty slick features for doing multiple OSs. However, you still need to write, a script that will run on Linux and a script that will run on Windows. And I'll show you guys an example of that here in a little bit. Okay, so I mentioned the repository.json. So this defines the metadata. So in this case, we've got description language and tags, and these tags are really useful because if you look here, I've got 114 actions here. But if I click on Active Directory, well, now I'm looking at the 24 Active Directory actions that I have. So that's where these tags come from, or that's where they're used in the UI. And then it's parameters.json. So this is where you can define parameters that the action accepts. David, can you run PowerShell scripts on Linux? So the answer to that is yes. If PowerShell core is already installed on Linux, you can just simply call the installed p2sh executable. And if it isn't, and I'm gonna have to double check here because I'm not sure. If it isn't, you would be able to. Well, actually, I wanted to go to. You would be able to ship a standalone PowerShell executable. I know on Windows they have a they build a standalone p2sh.exe. And I've tested with that. I haven't tried it with the Linux one. So if the Linux endpoint did not already have PowerShell installed on it, and the Linux compiled PowerShell core executable was standalone, then yes, you could ship that standalone executable, execute it, reference the included script, and you'd be running a PowerShell core script on Linux. I haven't tested that out yet. I've tested that on Windows, and it works on Windows. So I can let me get my notes open here. All right, putting that on my to-do list. Thank you. Okay, so back to the action itself. Okay, so this is what the parameters looks like. We have all the different types documented. So this is just a string type, and the different types show up differently in the UI, and of course, accept values differently. Cool. And so remember and we'll look at let's look at a little simpler one here. The golden config deploy. So this first one is a connector. Excuse me, and the connector. So this collect file is what we're looking at here. And a connector is defined as a connector by including this execution.json file. And right now, this is exactly what it should always have. In the future, we will support some alternate features, one of which is where the action is executed on a Runway hosted container. So we'll spin up a container, we'll run the action there, and call it good. So the use case there, and this we'll support this for more than just connectors, is that if you want to tie into like managing Azure, for example, why the heck do you need to install a runner somewhere to be able to manage Azure? We'll just spin up a container and run your AZ PowerShell scripts from our container. Or in the case of where it's customer hosted, in the customer hosted Runway portal, that Kubernetes cluster. Okay, and this also has the manifest run when. And so to support Linux, let's look at another connector here. Let's see, download file. So we actually looked at the download file. So to support Linux, we have the manifest must have a run win and a run lin. And so you can see here, both of them, one's calling a run.bat, one's calling a run.sh. And the separators are also OS specific, something to be aware of. And if we look in the Linux folder, we have this run.sh, and this just checks to see if Python is installed. And if it's not, Well, it ships with a Python executable. So it uses the included Python executable. And here in this repository, it's an empty file. I have a script that runs when this is deployed to Runway where it will replace this empty file with the Python executable. I just don't like stashing that in Git. That's all. And the connector itself, this is a cool part I wanted to get to. So this is a Python script. Now, I'm not going to explain all of it because I much prefer PowerShell, and Python always makes my eyes bleed. No, I'm just kidding. It's not that bad. This script to actually download, it's literally just calling the Runway executable. This -n tells it not to update. -s is the server that it's pointed at. And so this host, I should have gotten into what the settings.json. So when an action has parameters, Jonathan, give me just a second and I'll get to your question. So when an action has parameters, those parameters are supplied to the runner in the settings.json file. So to read parameters to an action, you load the settings.json file, and then the host key, as an example, is an automatically included variable in the settings.json file that tells you what your Runway host is. So right now, it's always going to be portal.runway.host. And in the future, if you're working with a self-hosted instance, it's going to be whatever your URL is. And then this job also takes a couple of extra parameters. So you can see we got a use path as well as a path variable. But at the end of this, it's running a Runway, looking at the right host, and then Runway download. That's all this is doing to be able to download that file. And because the Runway executable is executing inside of a job, it implicitly knows what to download. So we don't have to pass an ID or anything. So I want to deploy a bundle of 6 applications on a PC that already has Microsoft 365 installed. How do I learn to write the PowerShell script to do this? So that answer is going to be a little bit out of scope for what we're doing here tonight. But it would be possible that if you did have a PowerShell script that already did that, you can deploy it using Runway. Unless I'm misunderstanding that. And if I am, feel free to unmute yourself or throw it in the chat too. Okay. All right. So, again, I write these things down so I remember what we're doing here. Okay. So to actually get the actions from your device or a Git repository, we recommend a Git repository over just storing them locally. I've built out a template workflow. So this actions repository, like this is our production actions repository. And it's public if you want to see our actions, see any of the code I've showed tonight. But we use a workflow, GitHub action workflow. And it's pretty simple. So I just first of all download the Runway executable, Runway utility. Since this runs on Ubuntu, it's the runway.bin. And then I have this script, this replace executables. So there's several actions that have binary files in them, and I've just put empty files with the name of that file in the repository. And this replace executable script finds all of those and replaces them with the actual executable. That way I don't have to store the executable in Git. But certainly if you didn't want that extra complication, you can put the executable in Git. Totally fine. And then we authenticate to Runway. And then this publish script, which is what we'll actually look at here, actually has the repo scripts, publish. So this is where we're actually using the Runway executable. So Runway, and we're doing a Runway build, which tells it to put the action into a zip file. And I skipped this part. You reference the manifest.txt. And so then it grabs everything that's with the manifest, and that becomes the action. And then this -p tells it to publish it. And if you want to publish the action so that every Runway user can see it, you use the --public. But that is, don't do that unless you really want everyone to see your actions. And we do this here in this repository because this is considered was where we put all of our actions that we make available to all of our customers. But if you're running actions you want to share, yeah, go for it. If you write actions you want to submit a PR to our repository, absolutely. But for the most part, I don't recommend using public. And then we name our actions based on the folder structure. So that's what this. I'm looking at the base path and then building the namespace off of the folder names. So for instance, just really quick here. So this endpoint, let's get installed software is literally going to be, click on it here, endpoint : get installed software. That's just how we do our naming. Okay. Oh, I already did the custom connectors. Sweet. I'm a little out of order. Okay. So and there's two really cool things I want to show you guys. So since Runway is completely API driven, we don't have to do things in the UI. And I have a really good example of this. So this is another public repository that you guys can take a look at. And there's what I'm doing in this repository is I'm defining jobs and actions in the same repository and then publishing them to Runway using the Runway SDK. And there's two reasons I'm doing this. And one is, well, first of all, Runway has some scheduling capabilities I haven't shown you yet. And also jobs and actions that can be stored in Git and synced. I mean, it's an API. The SDK works great for that. So let me just run through this really quick. And this link to this one is in the session docs, or if you guys want it, I can post in the chat. The actions here, and this actions, we've already gone through how we manage actions in our repository. It's the same thing in this one. So I'm not going to run through and do this again. But in this case, I have a couple of different actions. So for instance, I have a stale computers action. We got the manifest parameters repository, but this is designed to run on a domain controller or on a system that can talk to a domain controller that already has the Active Directory module installed on it. And this grabs any stale computers that have not logged in since 90 days and were created at least 2 weeks ago. So it's a little fancier than what is it? Search 80 account. I think that's the built-in one. And it just runs a filter to find those, and then based on those, it'll find them, and then it will move them to a disabled OU. So pretty simple use case. And I also have one for stale users. So same thing. So the idea with this repository is I want to set these up as scheduled tasks, but not through the task scheduler, but through Runway, because you can schedule them through Runway. To run on a domain controller. So in this jobs folder, I've defined the jobs in JSON. So I've given it a name. I've told it what runner I want it to run on, and DC1, that's my domain controller. And I've defined the schedule. So in this case, it runs every... Oh, I always forget what this one is. I'm sorry. I think this means every Sunday. I can't remember, because I think Monday is day one in our week setup, which is weird. But don't quote me on that. It's in the docs. And this runs at 1 a.m. UTC. So for me, that's going to be 1 a.m. minus, I think, 8 hours. And then if you can give it some repetition here as well. And some of the feedback I've heard from folks on the scheduling is that having our own custom way to schedule is terrible, and we should probably just do cron notation. Anybody here have some thoughts on that? I'm just curious. I'm gonna take a drink, Wally. What are you thinking?
Personally, yeah, I would say stick with cron.
Okay. And the reason
and
I
that's
ask is
that's because if you're not, you guys aren't unique in having your own scheduling system, right? It's always when you switch between things, like, hey, I've got here, this is cron, this is done with the Windows task scheduler, some other app that's being used. it's very hard to context switch, especially when you have 3, 4, 5 applications in the environment that you're trying to utilize.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the reason I ask is because now I can go back to the developer and say, hey, we had some more people say that cron is the way to go. And I wouldn't be lying either. Okay, so with this, we have the schedule defined as well as the actions. So in this case, it's going to run 80 stale computers, and then I've got another download files action. It's very similar, but it's in PowerShell instead of Python. And then the same thing for stale users. And I have the script itself. Well, and I'm not going to dive into super detail on this script. However, if you guys got questions on it or want to follow up with me on setting something up like this up, let me know. But this script ingests that JSON. So first it grabs some information here. Since I'm defining resources in the JSON by name, I have to get. So for instance, if I want to get a runner by name, I have to load all the runners and then filter it. There's a feature request I have in to be able to just request by name, and actually, you can build a query and submit a query to query for runners that meet that have a name of the specific way. Queries are really difficult, and it is on the roadmap for the SDK to automatically build queries. So I'm just saying that because I really need to work on that, and it's just difficult. I haven't yet. So we load the JSON, and it's an array. So for each of those jobs, we create the job if it doesn't already exist, and this is idempotent. So it'll if it exists, it'll use the existing one, and then we assign the runners to it, and then for each of the actions, we add the action to it. So you can see we've got, for instance, we see if the action already exists first, and if it does, then we are going to. So we're creating the array outside of the for each loop. So it's creating this action setting request object, which has the ID of the action. And in this case, if it's a connector, the connector ID as well. And if it's not a connector, then it just creates the action. And then we're adding those actions to the job using setRW job action. And then finally, we're setting the job schedule. However, you will notice that this looks really weird. It looks like I'm setting the schedule twice. It's because there's a bug in the SDK that I have fixed in version 0.2, which I meant to have released this week, but haven't. So I ran into some other issues. So that will be fixed in 0.2, which should be out by next week. But yeah, that's a really good use case for the SDK. But my favorite use case for the SDK is let me clear my screen here. But using the SDK, we can run a PowerShell command on any runner within a very short amount of time. You guys are all familiar with Invoke Command, right? Invoke Command, you give it a computer name, and then you can give it a script block, and then that'll execute on that endpoint and return the results to you. So, but let's say that you can't connect to DC1, which I can't, for instance. We can use Runway to do something very similar. So I invoke PowerShell command, give it a runner name, DC1, give it a script block, and we'll say get 80 user. Oh, I'm like trying to tab complete. I don't have the Active Directory module installed on this device, so I can't tab complete. Filter all, and we'll assign it to a variable. And what this is going to do is leveraging Runway. It's going to set up a job. It's going to assign the PowerShell run command job or action to that job, and the parameter to that action is going to be get 80 user filter star, and then that's going to execute on the endpoint. Oh, what? Oh, here I am so confident that it was going to work. See, runner name, DC1, script block, get 80 user dash filter star. I'll try it again. This was literally working like right before this. I'm gonna be very disappointed if this doesn't work in the middle of a demo, because this is literally my favorite part about the SDK. Don't do this to me. Okay, so we're going to. I didn't get it. Dang it. So let me try it again. I want this to work while we're on the meeting here. So I've just switched over to the other PowerShell window I have where it was actually working earlier today. I'm gonna run it again. And if this doesn't work, then I'm gonna scroll through my PowerShell history here, and I'll show you guys what it should look like. And I don't have a good explanation for why it wasn't working, other than okay, so something's going. I don't know why it's. Yeah, it must just be because I was in the downloads folder. I'm not here. Anyway, obviously the command can be improved so that it always works instead of just sometimes. So what this is doing in the background is, like I said, it creates a job, it executes a command, and then it's deserializing the object as CLI XML and writing that to the. Actually, I'm gonna add a little bit here. So it's writing that to the or standard out, which Runway reads as what it calls the thread log, and I'll show you that here in Runway. And then the commandlet here then reserializes that into a PowerShell object. So we can run that command on DC1, and we can use that object as we would any other object. So using Runway, and you saw how fast that was. Now we can execute a PowerShell command on any device within it's usually about 15 seconds is what I've seen in testing it on various devices. And I think it's really cool, in my opinion. And so here, and we're not shy about how we do these things. So if I go to my jobs here, knowledgeable shark. So here's what it is. It's running the PowerShell run command action, which the source code is in our actions repository, which is running this command and outputs CLI XML. So that's what we're looking at here. And then the PowerShell SDK is reading this log and then serializing that back into a PowerShell object. So it's kind of a workaround to actually establishing like a PowerShell session for it, but it's pretty cool. I can't remember if it keeps the type or not though. It converts into a custom object. Yeah, that's honest. From just a personal opinion, that's one of my favorite parts about Runway is that it's so fast that we can build a job on the fly and get those results within just 15 seconds. So, yeah, that's everything I had prepared for tonight. I mean, does anyone have any questions, any comments, anything?
I'm going to start off with a follow-up from my earlier question about settings. My first question is, is there a way for this to, so you may have a wide variety of versions of PowerShell in the environment because Windows PowerShell, right? Because hey, people weren't updating it, and whoever's managing it isn't updating it. So one machine may have the latest version of WMF, and someone may have the original version from when it first got installed or whatever. Is there a way to define only run this on here if WMF 5 point whatever is installed? Otherwise, don't run it here, knowing it's not going to run.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to come back to a similar answer I have for another question. You can write the script to do that, and so let's see, the PowerShell, Windows PowerShell version is tied to the WMF version, right? So you can say if PS version table dot, the version is less than whatever it is, then, don't run, as an example. But there's not a built-in a built-in way to say only run on certain versions.
Okay.
I'm taking some notes here too, by the way.
My next question, because you have a free version and you talked about up to 100 clients, but there's nothing that really stops somebody with, say, 1,000 clients and 1,000 devices that they want to manage using this, but only utilizing those 100 free licenses and being able to use those to run actions against those other computers and that they're connected to.
Yeah. So no, you're absolutely right. There's nothing stopping somebody from putting a runner on the domain controller and then managing using remote PowerShell to manage all the other devices.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's no. I mean, I'm not saying that's a good approach.
I'm not trying to give people ideas. I'm trying to understand, is there? I mean, obviously, I had the idea I won't be the only one, but
certainly.
I'm just curious about that licensing structure. Are you staying within the bounds of licensing? Whether or not that's the spirit of the license, that's one thing. The legal aspect of the licensor is another.
Yeah, and so
there may be legitimate reasons for this, right? Like much like your example, like you have a device that you can't directly connect to through Runway, so maybe you would have one of the other endpoints reach out to it, and that's a legitimate reason. But I'm talking about the non-legitimate reasons too.
Yeah, and so and this is something that I've been learning. This is my first experience with a startup. Is that we really have to focus our time on, we have to keep things simple enough that we don't have to spend a lot of time developing developing a license feature. That's something that no developer wants to ever do. They want to make their software work as cool as possible, and then now I got to make sure that people can't abuse us and do all this other crap. So limiting the runner count, that was the easy way to do it. And I think long term that we probably will reconsider or look at other things. I don't know. Maybe I think Bob, I'm not sure if you're listening right now, but he might have some other insight.
Yeah, I do have some insight. Let's put it this way. Right now we have a free version of the software that's up to 100 runners. And that's, frankly, I think it's subject to change. Because what we've found out is that people who really love our software and are exercising it for the purpose of deploying it in their environment, they could get done a hell of a lot of testing and proof of concept with a handful of runners, frankly. So, you can do a lot of testing with 5 or 10 runners. So that's still open for evaluation and looking at it. And so if we got 100 for now, I'd say hop on it while it's still that number.
Yeah, our goal is for anyone to sign up for an account and test it out without ever having to talk to a salesperson. That's something, I go to a website for whatever tool I was interested in, and you got to talk to a salesperson to get a demo. Shoot me now. So we don't do that. Now, if you want to get in, try it out, we got the documentation, we got free accounts, whatever you want. We'll reach out to you at some point, though.
Yeah, we work like heck to put in so many things for technical people to hit the ground running with good documentation, the GitHub stuff, videos, the SDK, you name it. And so the intent was, how do we take a technical product and make it so a technical person can hit the ground running?
Yeah.
In a self-service kind of way, if that's the way they want to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I forgot to mention this, and it looks funny because I'm zoomed in. But in the UI, we have links for everything: the PowerShell SDK, our action repository. We have a few videos on YouTube, and as well as our documentation.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, go ahead,
the examples that Anthony talked about here are kind of geared toward IT administration, and that's a perfectly acceptable use case for this system. Where we believe we're headed is to focus on DevOps teams who want to do app-to-app communications and without dealing with networking teams.
Right.
So we've got some new things coming that are basically we could provide a persistent encrypted tunnel between any two runners and be able to have real-time app-to-app communication. I really think that that's where we're going to make hay.
Awesome.
and we can't talk about it too much, but it's coming.
Well, yeah, we're basically getting it patented, so we're not going to have anything public on it yet until we get the patent filed, which in about 2 months. But if anybody wants to work with that privately, without publicizing it on the internet, we'll be glad to work with you on it because it's built.
Other people want to ask questions? Nobody ever wants to ask questions. Questions, people.
If not, it's not a big deal. Anyone's welcome to follow up with me afterwards. Sign up for an account. Tell me how it's broken, what you like about it.
I'll make another comment about this. We think that we're competing with legacy tools like Ansible, Puppet, and Chef, and we don't think we're going to displace them from where they dominate and where they do a great job. But we think that Runway is going to be a much easier to use system for the use cases where you need the network connectivity and you want to, and you maybe you're working at the edge, maybe it's a hybrid cloud environment, just where you need more flexibility and you need a system that's easier to understand.
Yeah. Now, does this also have some functionality for? I know Ansible doesn't, but I'm coming from a long time SCCM and also Intune infrastructure. And of course, things like Ansible are extremely useful for really quick app deployments. But with that said, if you have a client that goes missing, they're not reachable for a period of time. Maybe it's a reboot, maybe it crashed. Does it have its own mechanism for trying to rerun that task if the client's unreachable?
So it's as long as once you create a job, if you assign it to a runner that's offline, as long as that job stays created, then that runner will run it as soon as it comes online and sees that job is assigned to it.
Okay.
So, and one of the things that, so I've done a bunch of work with SCCM and Intune, and I just want to say that I hate how long Intune takes to do anything. It's like they took SCCM and they made it worse. Like I hated how long SCCM took to do things, and Intune is even freaking worse. So the polling interval it always stays the same with Runway. In fact, it's a WebSocket, so it's always active. So it's not like Intune where the computer boots up and it checks a few times, and then it's 8 hours later it checks and it's like 8 hours later it's like.
Well,
my experience.
For the grand scheme of managing all your systems, they're great. But I work for a trading firm. We have some teams that have their own developers behind them, and it's like, hey, I made this app. This trade team has a 10-minute window for us to deploy this app. Can we make it happen, right? And no, Intune and SCCM can't do that. I, I'm
Not
like,
unless
I
you get
can
your
give you
hands on those
15
endpoints as well.
minutes. Yeah, the best I could do was shave it down to 15 minutes guaranteed. Will it beat 10 minutes? More than likely, but you know what? I'd rather not stake my job on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, something
But
like Runway. I think it has a good mix of both, to where it's, like I said, it can resume or pick up jobs if it missed them, and then as well run them very quickly.
Oops. Other people want to talk? I know I love hearing myself talk.
Do you guys see building out more examples of like input forms or intake like workflows to feed the parameters to some of the jobs to make it more of like a self-help service?
Can you give an example?
So let's say I want to create a new website, right? Now
Okay.
you want to get the end user the ability to create their own websites, whether it's IIS, Apache, Nginx, doesn't matter.
Okay.
But let them pick what certificate provider they want to use. How many servers do they want to spin up in the background? All
Okay.
those types of typical inputs that would then feed into, essentially a kind of a back-end Terraform script that get launched with PowerShell or something along those lines.
So, and I've actually talked to a few other folks about the different types of parameters. So right now, we can, and this is the action that I've written that has the most parameters. But one of the things that we can't do is we can't say, well, if you select this parameter, then also ask for X, Y, and Z. And so it's just a static list of parameters. So if that use case fits inside of that, we can do that. However, this is one of the things that we will be, once we can gain some more traction, we're going to be revisiting and actually building out, a more advanced way to accept parameters. And then also speaking to, having another, a user that can run this. So we do have. So I'm going to talk in the right now and in the future. So right now, you can add multiple users to your Runway tenant. And you can give them, we have 2 different levels of permissions. And in the future, we're going to have a more advanced access control scheme to where you could assign a user to only be able to run, certain actions on certain endpoints. But we do not have that currently. Turns out it's really complicated. Our developer basically bashed his head on his desk for a weekend and decided that it's not worth it right now. So, but that's a really good use case, and I will say that yeah, absolutely, you could run like a Terraform script through Runway, and because we don't restrict what you can run, so you could literally run. Isn't there like an offline version of Ansible, and you can send it an Ansible playbook, or even I did a bunch of research a couple weeks ago. I think Chef also has like a Chef Solo. Is that what it is? And then Puppet has another. I mean, you can run all this stuff. You can send. I mean, shoot, man. I had another use case that probably would have been good here. So let's look at like this deploying connector. So this first step, you could be doing a DSC config, and then you're and sending it out to. Sorry, I'm running through a couple of different ideas that I had of this from a while back. So you could have a workstation or a server where you're developing that DSC config, and step 1 is you grab that config, and then step 2 is you deploy it out to all of the other servers that you want it deployed to, and then you're actually compiling it and applying it. And you don't need a pull server, and you can just periodically do that in Runway. And then you're not worrying about you setting up a pull server, you're just setting this up on a schedule. Runs every hour or runs every day or whatever. And that's Clem. I'm sorry that went a little beyond what you're asking, but
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. It's good to hear good ideas from folks and then hear it reiterated. I'm also taking some notes. That's a big value add that I get out of talking to folks like you guys.
And you said you guys have like informational videos on. Does that include how to deploy it and how to get started for your product videos?
So so we have, I think it's like 9 videos so far.
Okay.
So we've got, let's see, so we've got like a how to install it. So I do run through that in a video, how to install it. But that's one thing that I have in my backlog, is to actually have like just like the 5-minute getting started with Runway, which is going to be a very condensed version of what some of the things we covered here. So yeah, there are some good videos here, but the best way, if you want to jump into this as a refresher, is in the docs. So docs.runway.host. This first page, getting started, this runs you through installing a runner, and then if you want to do some other deployment, even running your own actions, we got links to that in here down further. And if you want to familiarize yourself with all of our nomenclature, we've got all those here, and these have all been written out, so you can look at a runner. This tells you what a runner is, and we also do node runners, is what we call them. So you can spawn a runner off of just a process, and that runner will exist until that process terminates, which is pretty cool. And the idea there is that if you wanted to, like you have an ephemeral container, but you don't want to install it as a service, well, you just set up a node runner. I mean, heck, you could, in a GitHub pipeline, you could probably set up a node runner. But we've got everything should be documented in here. And if you find that you have questions, definitely reach out, because I maintain the documentation as well.
And I missed if you talked about it. Is there some API to like trigger actions or trigger tasks to run?
So that's a good question. And I just took a long time to pause there, because I had someone ask me that like 20 minutes before we started on here. So it's a little more complicated than just starting a job, because there's several different ways to initiate the job. So we can, let me just pull up the UI. So if we create a job and we assign it an action, I was going to do a simple action here. Let's see, inventory netstat. As soon as we hit create job, it automatically executes, because the default schedule, and I didn't run through any of the scheduling, but if we click on edit schedule, the default schedule is to run now. So as soon as the job is created, it is initiated. However, you can create it disabled, in which case it won't run until you enable it, and you can enable it through the API. Or if you create it and it executes, then you can come back and grab one of those jobs, and like this one, and I could re-execute it by hitting this run now button, and that makes an API call. I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't remember which one that is, but you guys familiar with Fiddler? So with Fiddler, it's an application that runs in the background, and will actually, here, let me bring it over my screen really quick. It records all the REST API calls that it notices. And I currently have it set to filter only for Runway calls. The only problem with showing it on a recorded screen is that it shows my session tokens. But if you're working with the UI, you can always ask me for help. But also, if you prefer to do it yourself, you can, using Fiddler, open up any of these calls that the UI makes, and see exactly what it does, which is really cool. And this is actually how I work with the SDK a lot. is because if you can look at, for instance, like this endpoints query schema, or no, it's not a good one, like endpoints query. So if we go to, so in the documentation, scroll all the way down to the bottom, we have this API overview. And in here, we have a link to our Swagger documentation, which is our API reference. Okay, and this isn't going to load for some reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat because I have it set as a bookmark here. And here in the our API reference, oh, it's probably going. So Fiddler makes everything slow down. So let's see, API/v2/endpoints-query. So I'm going to close that. So if we go to let's see, I see endpoint asset. So endpoints and endpoint assets are two different things, but maybe it is in here. We can see, oh yeah, let's see, endpoints query for Pi. Okay, I had no idea what that one is. Here we go, endpoint asset query. And so, okay, so this actually does queries the endpoint query, but this will tell you exactly what it, what the parameters are. And let's see, so the operation ID in this case is called endpoint asset _ query. And since the SDK is automatically generated on this, we can do a, let's see, a get command endpoint asset module PS runway, and we can surmise that it is going to be an invoke RW query endpoint asset, and then that's the call that we can make. Building a query in Runway, I'm not gonna try to do it here on the fly. It's something that I'm gonna add some helper commandlets to the SDK to build queries. They're a little too complicated for my brain. But yeah, since the SDK is built off of this Swagger doc, that's how you can work with both of them to find the commandlets. And there's some really weird names, and I in the next version, a lot of these are going to be renamed to something that makes more sense. Like this might be, I'm not going to sit here and speculate, but the names are going to make more sense in the future.
Yeah.
That's a long answer to your question. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and another thing I will point out that because we're a startup, we haven't. Typically, you look at an API reference and it'll be like endpoint asset. It'll tell you what an endpoint asset is and exactly what this does. We're not quite there yet on our detailed documentation. Yeah. Any other questions?
I'd like to say something. It's Bob. So here we are, as Anthony has mentioned, we are a software startup, and we are constantly looking at, okay, we've built this beautiful system. What's the best and highest use of it in the real world? It goes beyond PowerShell, and so if anybody wants to engage with us or engage with Anthony and just kind of brainstorm about who's the best audience for this system and in the real world use cases, we would love to have that kind of input.
It's a really good point. So if any of you all have time between work, family, and everything else, we'll be really grateful.
And I just look at this and I see Ansible, like based on my usage,
mm-hmm.
my potential usage, as an alternative to Ansible for many reasons. None of them bad. It's just like there's like that the task that does versus my needs versus Ansible, that's where they, the two collide very, very nicely. In that aspect, especially since it can, Ansible and Windows. I've never liked it.
Yeah.
So Ansible could be good for data centers with a bunch of Linux machines or cloud Linux stuff, but it's maybe not as going to be as good for Windows or remote systems or edge systems.
Yeah.
And we're gonna beat up on Ansible when it comes to our connectivity, to being able to connect anywhere to anywhere. Like basically, we're kind of like we're going to become an alternative to VPN for connectivity, especially relates to app communication. And that's not something that anybody's going to do. So we're kind of like a no-code network infrastructure product to give the DevOps people the freedom and flexibility to be self-sufficient to create connectivity without saying "Mother may I" from the networking teams, and just be self-sufficient and do it yourself.
Well, there are the security teams. I can clearly speak to them, and they, that's something I've dealt with a lot over the years, which is I had one CISO who was very much anti-cloud. So anything that touched the cloud, it was a long, drawn-out process of months.
Yeah.
I was in a similar situation myself once upon a time.
Yeah. In that case, we may end up having the system be available in the customer's private cloud, or if they have Kubernetes installed in their on-prem data center, that's going to be a future possibility.
Okay.
Because Kubernetes makes the system portable.
Okay.
And that was portable, not horrible, right?
Yeah. It did sound like horrible, but I knew you meant portable.
Yeah. Portable. Okay.
Well, since there doesn't seem to be other questions for you guys, I'm going to ask out for the rest of you. Are there any other questions that are not related to Runway from anybody? I know, Jonathan, you had a question that piques my interest in the chat room, and I didn't know if you wanted to elaborate. Okay, he's not responding.
Hey, Ted, thanks.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I haven't used the Ring Central interface, so it took me a moment to find the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a short story. I'm trying to be a startup managed services provider.
Okay.
Building a stack on top of Microsoft 365. Some security apps, some other apps. It is my impression that a number of app vendors will provide information about, how to run their deployment script in PowerShell, how to run their deployment in PowerShell. That seems to be somewhat common. But what I don't know, I can't imagine that with all the things that can go wrong with a stack of software and a script, that there isn't that first of all, I have to learn how to do it assuming it runs right. And I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah.
And secondly, I need to learn sort of how to start to figure out what to do if certain common mistakes happen. and I have no idea how to learn this stuff. I don't know good sources to start with. And I came to the meeting really in mind with asking this question. But I think I can't imagine that this question isn't of burning interest to at least one other person in this on this call, because this is something we all face.
Yeah. So
at least all of us who use Windows, and there's comparable things over on Linux.
I mean, I'll say from my experience, and you know, I spent 11, 12 years as an SCCM admin. You know, when it comes to installing software, like doing it through a script, like just running the script to install multiple pieces of software, it brings shivers down my spine for many reasons. One, like being able to check to make sure, is it done? Did it install properly? Is everything working?
Yeah, I figured there had to be a whole bunch of issues that I wasn't thinking of, and you just came up with the first one.
Yeah. You know, that doesn't mean you can't do it. That doesn't mean you know.
I know people who have this capability, so I know it can be done.
Oh yeah. It can be, and we can talk later. You should message me so we can get more in depth into your situation.
Yeah, I'll do that.
But one of the things that comes to mind first is the actual act of installing the software. So anything you do, you should do it like one script at a time. And in that, when I've done this where I've had to, what I'll do is I'll have the script that installs, and within that script, I'll have something to verify that this application is there, and everything I know that needs to be there is there. So in many cases, it'll, if you're installing an MSI using this, the first thing that I do is make sure like the registry entry is in there. That gets put into the system when an MSI gets installed. A well-written MSI. I should point that out. Well-written. There's some bad ones out there.
I'm not sure how these. I haven't seen these. I have seen one instance of these scripts from one vendor.
Mm-hmm.
Oh crap! Oh, I see what everything is.
Well,
but I have seen things, but I haven't studied them. Is the point? And I need to, and I have one in particular that I could probably just run pretty quickly, but I would want to study it before I did it, and that's,
yeah. So
my learning kind of thing.
Yeah, it's always good to have a couple of like machines. You can run a couple of VMs and just like hammer the crap out of them with like installs and uninstalls.
Yeah, snapshot them, run your install scripts, and then revert.
Yeah.
I have not yet run a VM on this computer, and it's only got 8 gig of RAM. Is that going to be a problem?
You can still run a lightweight VM. If you're just doing this to install software, you're not going to worry too much about speed.
Okay. Because I've been unwilling to take any of the 8 gig that I've got and convert it to virtual memory for a VM.
You should be able to still run this with 2 gigs. It's just going to be painful.
I
saw Anthony's eyes kind of like...
this is unfortunately a Windows 10 machine that cannot be upgraded. And so I think what I might do, though, is if I'm going to get into doing this for the next year and a half, which is about how much time I have left on Windows 10, I might just go put 4 gig in it and make it into 12. And then maybe that's the way I should look at this, is save up some money and get the 4 gig increase, and then I have space.
Yeah.
And
It's
you could-
probably,
Go ahead.
and the other part to this too, your hard drive space. I don't know how much you have available to you, but if you're going to run a Windows 10 VM on there, you need at least
I've
60
got
gigs. Or no,
I-
80 gigs.
I think I have 100. I think I've got a 200. Well, it was supposed to be 256, but it's really 230, and it's got 80 gigs used. So I think I have 150 left.
Yeah,
Okay.
plenty.
So you'll be okay. Yeah, Anthony,
Yeah.
I've had a few VMs. When I've had it at 60, it started complaining about running out of space, especially once like it starts running updates.
Oh yeah,
It runs out quickly. Now,
yeah.
Jonathan, you're just installing some software, and you're probably not going to run other things in there. So you can probably get away with 60 and not have to worry too much. But
Yeah, but I do need the extra RAM just to make this thing other than a snail.
Yeah. But like I was saying, you do this, you see what changes in your system. In particular, does it do any registry changes? If it doesn't, that's fine. You can also do a check on, is the folder created? Is whatever executable there? And test for those things to be there. And those are, those scripts are pretty easy. And, it depends on how heavyweight these applications are that you're installing this way. That'll determine how complex you need your scripts to be.
A lot of these are, at least a couple must be lightweight because they're agents that are going over to other places in the cloud. Right. And
okay. I will say, and we can talk more about this at a later time, but you can add into your your testing for scripts is like, is there a network connection? Is that thing either listening or calling out on that? On the port it's supposed to.
For this piece, I consider this basic stuff, but I don't know if it is or not. Is there any book you would recommend? That I need to read yet another book, right?
I mean, I always, when, the team I used to lead, the people I've worked with over the years, everybody, who wrote it? The Learn PowerShell in 30 Lunches.
Oh, in a month of lunches, yes.
Yeah, in a month of lunches.
I've seen of those, yeah.
That one is excellent. Everybody I've known who's read it has come away learning a lot more. On top of that, we had this conversation 3 months ago, where the other piece of this is, as you start learning this, to actually make use of, have something you want to get done, right? So in your case, you want to install software, right? So, the first step is, what's the task to install that software, right? And so it starts simple, like, it seems it's probably straightforward, like, one line to say, call this script. That seems simple enough. And then the next step would be, okay, test the path to see that it got installed. Step 3, test to see if the registry entry that should be there is there, right? And these are small steps, but if you think about them each step as its own thing to learn to do, rather than try and do the whole thing in one, it becomes manageable and becomes understandable,
See,
right?
and here's the other thing. It is my observation that Microsoft will probably, it is my belief, let's put it this way, I'll be somewhat precise in my language when talking about the software industry, that it's my belief that Microsoft is going to do more automated scripting now that they have the modern desktop, and that RMM tools will be over time less and less necessary for deployment. And so what I'm really hoping to do here is to do deployment, have it to the extent that it will auto update for patches, right? And, fill in whatever is left with RMM. Because what I've heard around, the comments I've seen suggest that while Microsoft might empower deployment and patching, they never really get around to reporting.
Well,
and so RMMs do that, and therefore, I may be going and I may be keeping kind of a two tools that do similar things, but come to depend more and more than on PowerShell and whatever is natively provided over time, and still backfill with the RMM.
Yeah. Well, I like I said, I've been a long time SCCM admin, and that's probably going to be overkill and expensive for your case, but it is.
It is clear to me that there's some.
But reporting that's Microsoft reporting tools, and it is fantastic, and it was backbone for a lot of work for us. Told us a lot of information, as well as giving the opportunity to create our own reports.
You know what? I never know what's going to happen, right? And but I do know I used to be able to write some pretty mean reports in fourth generation languages several decades ago. And I could do strange and wondrous things in reporting languages. And so I'm not afraid of that. And then there's Power BI, So it seems to me that there are a lot of pieces around. I've just got to get started. Of course, I have a whole bunch of other things I have to start at the same time, but this is modern technology, and this is business startup, and this is all of that stuff. So we're down to 4 of us, and I'm hoping that Anthony, you're picking up something. You're younger, so that's why I single you out. And I have no idea who the 4th person is, but I'm just assuming that the reason that you guys are here is because the conversation's interesting.
Oh, it's like you said, anyone that manages any number of endpoints has had to install software from an automated approach at least once, if not thousands of times.
Yeah, I understand that this could be like what was that image from?
It was my bread and butter. Okay, that was my bread and butter for a long time, and
so it's still needed with all the changes in technology. As long as there's going to be software, there's going to be deployments all over the place. There's the Greek myth of Sisyphus. Does this ring a bell with anyone besides me?
Pushing the stone up the hill.
Yeah, and then you slide, right? So this, I can't remember what the adjective verb of Sisyphus is. Sisyphusian, I don't know. But there is an
Something like that.
adjective verb of it. And I feel like the idea of automation is represented by that very well. But it is something that has to be done.
Yeah.
And so I thank you, and I'm looking forward to catching up on the next meetings.
And this is your first one, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's my first one. I had been at, I think I had been aware of the PowerShell user group, but it was like, oh God, another subject.
I was going to say, if you look at we have the YouTube channel, and on there we have obviously the past meetings, but Antoine, who didn't make it to this meeting, and I tried to once a week, once every other week, depending on how busy we are at work, sit and talk about a topic each time, which of course, installing software is something that comes up quite a bit for us, for many, many reasons, not just because it's dear to my heart. And
it helped to get you to this point in life. Let's face it.
It did. I mean, I'm a software engineer now, but it was because I spent so much time writing things to manage software, install software, and I'm such a stickler about how things need to look, with regards to software installations.
So, yeah.
I know Anthony heard me, reacted to me commenting on bad MSIs. You hit a few of them. I actually said to a company, I said, you need to hire a bunch of orangutans to actually do this right, because whatever you've got working on your MSIs have no idea how to do anything. And they did hang up on me, and we stopped doing business with them because it was such a pain to install their product, and it worked so poorly, in part because their MSI was so poorly written that we just had to give up on them. Had another company that wrote a PowerShell script to fix the things that their MSI did wrong.
Yeah, I worked for a local credit union here in Oregon, and we had no choice in some of the software that we use just because of regulations and that kind of thing. And we had to do an upgrade on one of the line of business softwares on all of our teller stations. So it was over 100, and the vendor gave us the installer and said, you have to manually run this on every single endpoint. And I said, ha ha, where's the script? And he said, no, I'm serious. And so that was my project, and I sure as heck didn't want to go and get my fingers on 100 different teller stations. So what's that sysinternals tool that you can use to see what a process does? Is that
Proc Explorer?
Yeah, that's it. So I think this was several days of work running the installer, going through the options, and then running through every single step. Well, it turns out that it extracted a bunch of different installers from inside and then was calling them with parameters. So all I had to do was run it and extract itself and then grab those and then see what it was doing. And I was able to write a script.
Wow.
But that was a situation where the vendor was like, nope, not possible. And I said, well, I don't want to do it. So
no. That it's after a while, what things should work and what things shouldn't, and not be surprised at the things that shouldn't work. Right? That's what experience is. That's what experience is.
Yeah. And you know what? I know how to use the Process Explorer now. So
I mean, this is how we learn about some of these tools, right?
yeah,
You get kicked in the pants a couple of times.
and you learn that you don't like being kicked in the pants.
Exactly.
The
So,
only
anyway, guys,
time you can gracefully accept getting kicked in the pants
I gotta drop, guys.
is when it's someone in your own nuclear family. And then you have to be graceful about getting it. Or gracious, I'm not sure which.
Yeah.
Gentlemen,
well,
it's
I
a
want to
pleasure
thank you,
meeting
Anthony.
both.
It's a pleasure meeting you, Jonathan. Anthony, thank you so much for your stuff. I'm gonna
Sure.
spend some time looking at this. I do know I have a friend or two that may be very interested in this. Plus, I'll try and see if this team I have at my company would be interested in trying this out too.
Yeah, and you tell them they have a direct line to somebody who does a lot of things here at Runway, including supporting customers and talking to developers. I mean, we're a startup, so there's not very many of us.
And these are guys that if they start tinkering with it, they are going to have plenty to say.
Great.
They're smart, wonderful guys.
Yeah, the good and the bad. I mean, because we can't grow unless we hear the bad.
Exactly. So.
Sounds like a bunch of smart programmers to me. That sounds normal.
Yeah, which is what's great about picking up folks like technical